All right. Hey, everyone. It's Dr. Tar. We are a few minutes behind schedule due to technical difficulties, so I'm going to let some more people come on. Hello, everyone. If you're just joining me, thank you all for your patience. I had some technical difficulties. The title of our conversation is God is good all the time. And not only is life sometimes not good, technology is not good. So technology would not let me be great in starting off, but I just want to welcome you here. If you're joining in, feel free to say hello to me. I love to communicate with the Dr. Tar community. And I am so excited for our conversation tonight because it is one I feel like is so needed around the topic of understanding and getting in front of and nurturing our mental health. And so if you're just joining in, please feel free to leave your email address in the comment section just to stay connected to the Dr. Tar community. But I am going to get into it because time is of the essence. And as always, I just feel so honored for you all joining me. And if you're joining the replay, please feel free to leave a comment. So let's get started. So in thinking about tonight's conversation, one of the things that I wanted to just be very transparent about in my post was that we are 8 days into October and it has already taken me through a multitude of emotions. And if you felt that way, feel free to give me a thumbs up. But one of the things that made it important to me to have this conversation is understanding that as we are going into a new season, as we're going into this fourth quarter, understanding, when we talk about mental health awareness, this is Mental Health Awareness Week or Suicide Awareness Month or Domestic Violence Month, all of those things have a way of impacting our mental health and our emotional well-being. And so when we're talking about mental health, one of the things that I want to do tonight is just have an honest conversation about ways that we can better acknowledge where we are as it relates to how we're feeling and things that we can start to do to be proactive in the care of our mental health and our well-being, so that we become more proactive in our stance or in our journey towards healing and recovery versus reactive. So one of the things about mental health or about our emotions is that a lot of us have been taught that the good emotions are joy, happiness, satisfaction, and bad emotions, anything else, right? And when we do that, one of the things that happens is that when we feel certain emotions outside of joy, happiness, satisfaction, we literally start to create this resistance within ourselves where we start to either reject that emotion or we start to feel bad about it. And the interesting thing that happens is that when we do that, we actually cause that emotion to become stronger, and we actually cause that emotion to become more pronounced in our mind. And so it's almost like, the more attention that I try to not give it, or the more I try to not think about it, the stronger that thought becomes and, becomes to us, and it becomes a contradiction. And so one of the things that we're going to start with tonight is, how do I create the space, or how do I acknowledge that it's not that I don't need the emotion to show up, but when we're talking through this evening, it's how do I not grab the bait, or how do I not get on this train? What can I do to just notice it? And what can I do to just allow myself to experience this? And the reason for that, again, is because, and Dee, I'm coming to that when you talk about how do we break that, I'm speaking about the statement I made on negative emotions. So we're getting right into that. So one of the things, or the first step to do, is how do I get myself to just acknowledge it, right? When we get this negative emotion, a lot of times, and again, give me a thumbs up if you can relate, because I'm gonna give myself a thumbs up on this, is that we try to reject it, right? Like, oh, I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to force myself to feel something else, or I'm going to distract myself by eating, or I'm going to distract myself by doing something else. And what we find is that emotion tends to kind of seep into our mind, and now I'm starting to think thoughts about it, or now I'm starting to act out in a way or behave in a way that allows this emotion to show me that it's there. And so when we're doing this, one of the things that I want to talk about tonight is, when we talk about mindfulness, or when we talk about understanding and getting in front of our mental health, that takes away the need or the urgency to resist, reject, or shame ourselves. So not only do we sometimes, I'm trying to resist this thing, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to feel it, I don't want to feel it, I don't want to deal with it. Then I feel guilty about even feeling it. And again, I'm gonna give myself my own thumbs up for that. I feel bad about me even experiencing this emotion. So not only now am I experiencing the emotion, right? So now not only am I angry, but now I'm also feeling guilty, or now I'm also feeling ashamed. And so when that happens, it just creates this spiral that we tend to go down, and we're not able to get ourselves out of it, right? So I started with feeling bad today, but by the time I end up or finally get myself out of it, I've gone down the past 7 years of all the other times I felt bad, or all the other times this person made me angry, or all the other times that this person didn't show up. And what we find ourselves in is in this rut that leads to anxiety or depression. And so for those of you who've never sat in on a Dr. Tara Tuesdays, I want to just briefly describe how I conceptualize the thinking that comes with anxiety or depression. So anxiety is what we tend to call futuristic thoughts. So those are our what if thoughts. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? So the question I always ask people is, how many of us have ever had a conversation with someone and the person isn't even there, right? So they're going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, right? We're playing out this entire conversation, and it just creates and fuels more and more anxiety. And the interesting thing about anxiety, so anxiety is on this one hand, let me put it here. Anxiety is on this one hand, but on the other hand is depression, right? So depressive thoughts are, this didn't happen. And so anxiety leads to like our heart racing, our stomach getting upset, us having trouble sleeping. So notice, and when I'm saying this, I want us, those of you who are listening, to notice the signs and the cues that our body, or that your body is sending you. Because when we talk about getting in front of our mental health, usually the first indicator is something is off, either physically or physiologically. So I'm noticing that, like Dee, you said, I'm eating more, or I'm not sleeping. I'm either having trouble falling asleep, or I'm having trouble staying asleep, or I'm noticing something in my stomach. I'm getting these physical cues. And part of what we sometimes do in our attempt to resist or reject what we're feeling is that we resist or reject the cues that our body is sending us, or our signals that the body is sending us. So anxiety is that one part, that futuristic thinking. But then on the tail end of that is depressive thinking. So those are our past tense thoughts. So this didn't happen. And because this didn't happen in the past, then this isn't going to happen. Or because they didn't do this before, they're not going to do this now. Or because I didn't do this before, I'm not going to do this now. And it creates this cycle of where I'm literally between depressive thinking and anxious thinking. And I'm literally moving in that direction. I'm adding to more things that add to either what hasn't happened, or what is going to happen, or what I'm fearful is going to happen. And what I miss out on is the present moment. And so when I'm talking about getting in front of our mental health, or honoring or creating the space for that, what I'm really saying is, how do we become mindful of where we are? And so that goes back to your statement, Dee, around understanding about what do we do when these negative emotions come? And so the first thing I want to say is that from a clinical standpoint, or from an emotional standpoint, our emotions are pretty neutral. And so when we have the term negative emotions, that already sends a signal to me from a mental standpoint that I shouldn't feel this, right? This is bad that I'm feeling this way. It's bad that I'm angry. It's bad that I'm upset. It's bad that I'm anxious. And that adds to more of the shame. And that also adds or creates a stigma around us acknowledging that I feel this way, or acknowledging that I, need help. And so when we're talking about it, and so Yada, when you're talking about that insomnia, my mind being overload, that's all anxiety, right? And so when I feel this way, if I've already conceptualized it as this is a negative emotion, then I'm going to feed into that. I'm either going to respond through shame or rejection, or trying to resist. And so from a mindful standpoint, I want us to acknowledge that our emotions can be neutral, meaning that all of our emotions have the power to do one of two things. They're either going to motivate us, or they're going to immobilize us. They're either going to motivate you, or they're going to immobilize you, period. So a lot of times when we're angry, or I'm feeling anxious, we feel stuck, like I can't move, right? I am stuck in this place. I'm thinking about, again, what hasn't happened or what did happen. And so how can I get that anxiety to motivate me to do something different? On the flip side of that, one of the things that we often see too is I'm feeling happy. And if this is an emotion that I haven't allowed myself to experience, that can be a great immobilizer, right? How many of us, give me a thumbs up, how many of us have ever self-sabotaged? Things are going well, things are going great. I woke up feeling peaceful. I've been doing this, I've been doing a journal, I've been doing whatever. And then, you know what? I've got it under control. I'm gonna stop everything, right? So I've been immobilized by success. I've been immobilized by joy. Or you don't want to get too, I've heard people literally say this, you don't want to get too excited because you don't know when the other shoe is going to fall. And so when we talk about emotions, one of the things that I want us to challenge ourselves lovingly, or allow ourselves, rather than challenge, but to allow ourselves to do, is to see all of our emotions through the lens of compassion. They are what they are, right? I feel what I feel. And so when we do this, we allow ourselves to take a mindful approach to our healing process. And when we're talking about that, it allows us to be where we are. There's this wonderful book, and I'll put it in the comments when we end, called Wherever You Go, There You Are, by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he talks about, you know, wherever you are in the spectrum, wherever you are in your emotional journey, allow yourself to be there. And so when we do that, there is an exercise that we do where we allow ourselves, and again, Dee, I'm going back to your comment about how do we not, or what do we do when these negative emotions come? But when we have any emotion that brings on an experience that we wish was different, I'll say that. One of the things that I want to allow us to do is allow ourselves to see them just as thoughts, right? So emotions bring thoughts, thoughts trigger behaviors. A lot of times we get behaviors straight from emotions, and that's not true. Emotions trigger thoughts. Thoughts a lot of times, trigger those behaviors. And so if I can make that connection, I'm feeling this way. And because I'm feeling this way, I am thinking this thing. Because I am thinking this thing, I want to do or not do this behavior, right? A 3-step process. And so if I can start at step 1, this emotion that allows me to think this thought, then what we're doing is, can I allow myself to just see it as a thought, right? Oh, look at that. There's that thought about this. There's that thought about this. There's that thought about this. And when we do that, what happens is that it allows us literally, and this happens within our brain, it causes us to separate ourselves from that emotional experience. A lot of times when we're feeling stuck, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling depressed, I literally take on that identity of my emotions, right? I become this person. I become this identity. I have to then fulfill this role. When I'm allowing myself to see it in a mindful way, I'm allowing myself to see it, or see this thought, as separate from me. And that's the first step when we're talking about how do we begin to change, or how do we begin to become proactive. And like Christina, like you said, understanding the origin of the thought really is important. And so I want to stay with that just for a little bit, because it is, but sometimes it may not be healthy, because sometimes if I am looking for the origin of the thought, a lot of times if I don't have it in a safe space, or if I'm not able to contain it, it can send me down a spiral. So what I would say to that is, I don't necessarily have to understand the origin of the thought. I can just understand I'm thinking this. I can understand I'm thinking this, and I can allow myself to see it just as a thought. Now, further work is, yes, where did this thought come from? How did this thought get here? What thought, and how does this thought, just going back to what you're saying, how does this thought create a story for me that may not be true? And so when I get to that point, then one of the things that I want to do is, how do I allow myself to create a new narrative around this story, or around this emotion, or around this situation? And so when I do that, what I then allow myself to do is, how do I allow myself to see this differently? So I can acknowledge, you know what, there's this thought, I'm feeling it. And when we find ourselves getting stuck in that spiral, then giving into that. And when I say giving into that, what I mean is incorporating compassion. So acknowledging this is hard, right? This is hard. I feel this way, not, oh, I'm feeling away. I feel this way. I feel anxious. I feel angry. And I'm caught up in this web, right? When we think about literally, I don't know how many of you have ever walked into a spider web. It's false, so they're all around. But how do I get out of this thing? How do I start to peel back the layers? So acknowledging where we are. This is hard. This is where I am. And then we allow ourselves to bring in that dialect, which I all the time talk about, that and yet I'm still showing up, or and yet I'm still willing to see this differently. And so when we do those two things, one, allow ourselves to see the thoughts outside of us. And then two, allow ourselves to acknowledge the work that it takes in thinking about it differently. I'm able to then incorporate that compassion, and I'm no longer rejecting it. And this is important because when we take away the rejection, I'm allowing myself to be or have a human experience as it relates to my emotional process. So many of us, when we are inundated with, and again, I'm just going off of the month of October, we had, the trial regarding the police officer, we had the neighbor, we had, other issues going on in our personal lives, other issues going on professionally. When we have those situations happening, one of the things that also happens is that we can begin to attract, or we can begin to put ourselves in situations that allow us to take on so much. So then we literally become overstimulated, right? So I know the first time I looked on Facebook or Instagram or social media or had this phone call with someone, I didn't feel good. And rather than putting something in place right then and there, I look at the next post and I feel even worse, or I feel even angrier, or I feel even more upset. And then I go to the comment section and I read the comment section, and now I'm just angry, and now I'm going back and forth. And so when we talk about I'm sorry, you made me laugh. And so when we do that, a lot of times we are overstimulating ourselves and making it harder for ourselves to come out of this. And when we're talking about getting in front of our mental health, a lot of times what happens is that I have built up my own tolerance to my emotions. I have learned how to ignore the cues that my body is sending me, that I am feeling a certain way, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling tension within my shoulders or within my neck. Like Donyetta said, I'm having insomnia. I'm ignoring these cues because I've accepted them as a way of life. And so I don't do anything about it literally until my body breaks down, until I break down crying at work, until I, pass out in the middle of the day because I'm exhausted. And the interesting thing about it is that I'll take that too. But what I'm saying is that it doesn't have to get to that point in order for us to do something about it. We can start to be proactive. And so how do we become proactive? Part of that work is acknowledging those things that create instances or feelings of peace for us. And this is a process too, especially if my baseline is one where I feel anxious. My baseline is one where I feel angry. My baseline is one where I'm always on the go. And the reason I want to stay with that one for a second is because when I'm always on the go, a lot of times what I'm doing is using distraction, so I don't have to deal with what it is that I'm feeling. I can just kind of put that on everyone else. And the danger with that is that I'm going to burn out. I'm going to run myself ragged, and I'm going to be angry at everybody who's asking me to do something, yet I haven't set a boundary to say no. And so when I'm able to deflect, I am kind of denying myself my own healing process. And so when we're talking about becoming proactive, the thing that is going to happen is when we are able to connect. And sorry, Dee, that you're not able to connect, but keep trying. And hopefully everyone else is still able to maintain the connection. But when we're able to see this as something that I want to get in front of, it literally starts from the moment that I wake up. It literally starts from the moment that I wake up. When we sleep, and there's this wonderful IG page that I love called the Nap Ministry, and I'm going to shout them out because they have all these beautiful, beautiful truths about the importance of rest and rejuvenation. But when we sleep, we literally give our brains and our body a chance to rest. And so even if I have insomnia, the moment that I'm sleeping, when I wake up, I am almost giving myself a blank slate. And so when I do that, one of the things that happens is what can I put in that place from the moment I wake up? What can I put in that place? So what is it that I can begin to do first thing in the morning that brings me joy? Or what is the thought that I can think of that allows me to feel connected to the things that bring me peace? And the first thing that I would want to encourage us all to do is acknowledge what are the things that I like. I remember being asked this question, and I talked about it a little bit in our talk around authenticity last Tuesday, but how would you describe yourself based on who you are versus what you do? What are your likes and dislikes? So many of us identify ourselves by our roles, whether it's professional or personal. My role as a professional, or my role as a parent, or my role as a wife or partner or sister, that I don't even know what it is that I like, right? Because I haven't gotten or I haven't allowed myself the opportunity to really start to delve into this brings me joy, or I enjoy this, or I enjoy this, or I enjoy that. And so the first step in this, thank you, Dee. The first step in this is, how do I start to acknowledge and connect with myself? What things bring me peace? What things bring me joy? That's step number one. And I'm going to stay with that because that is so important, because so often when we feel emotions that we don't want to feel, when I feel depression, when I feel anxiety, when I feel grief and loss, it causes us to feel a connection. Those emotions are based in fear, right? Those emotions are based in fear. So anxiety is fear of what's going to happen. Anger, fear of lack, right? It's not enough. So I feel that you are impeding on me, so I have to be angry, right? So it has to become a control. Grief, fear of loss. I'm going to lose something. And so when we're operating and moving out of fear, I'm not able to connect with myself. And so connecting with myself allows me to create things that bring me joy, the things that bring me peace. What are they? And out of that list, and I really want you all to write them down. Out of that list, which one is the easiest for me to start with, right? Again, it's not about hiding or rejecting the thoughts we don't want to experience. It's about maximizing and emphasizing those thoughts we do want to experience. And so when I get that break, when I see myself laughing or see myself or find myself singing this song, how do I amplify that? And so I want to go to Donyetta's point. I feel myself anxious and depressed due to chronic neck pain every day and tend to eat it away. It's my comfort food because it seems like this pain will not go away. Now I'm more depressed because of the weight gain. So you're talking exactly about that anxiety, depression cycle, right? I'm scared that it won't go away. That's future tense because of what has happened, right? Because of what I've been feeling. So I'm caught in that anxious depression cycle, and my body wants comfort. So when we think about food is comfort. So I want us to just acknowledge where we are. A lot of times when we crave sweets, I'm craving comfort. When I crave salt, that's usually a sign of anxiety, right? Salt or crunch is usually a sign of anxiety. And so, Donyetta, I'm going to put a book in the comment section that may be great for you or anyone else who's experiencing chronic pain, but it's called Full Catastrophe Living. And what it is a way to create a mindful experience around pain and healing from pain, because pain in and of itself. So an interesting thing about pain, and then I'll continue, but an interesting thing about pain is that when I experience pain, especially chronic pain, my brain sends the same neurotransmitters and the same hormones, well, not hormones, but the same neurotransmitters to that pain site that are needed in maintaining a healthy emotional state, right? So a lot of times what we see in people who experience chronic pain are increased rates of depression, because those neurotransmitters are going to my neck or they're going to my shoulder and when they do that, it's depleted from my brain. So I start to feel a dip in my mood. And so one of the first, and this is not, saying that anyone that you need this, but often one of the first courses of action for anyone experiencing chronic pain is antidepressants, just to try to get your neurotransmitters or your brain function back, because it's sending all those neurotransmitters to other parts in your body trying to ease that pain. And so that's a very, very, very common response. And so part of what I would say to that is, again, where's the easiest place for me to start? as far as the pain or the eating, right? So if I'm experiencing this pain, can I visualize it leaving this part of my body? And the book will help you do that. Can I experiencing it? Can I visualize it leaving a certain part of my body? Can I visualize or can I emphasize the parts that are pain free? And can I see them spreading throughout other parts of my body? So even if I can't get it to my neck, can I enjoy that my knees don't feel pain, right? Can I visualize what that feels like? And can I allow that to kind of come through different parts of my body until I get to the point where I can feel it spreading to the parts of my body that are holding that tension? Can I allow myself to feel the tension leaving my body? So that will help you with that. And so when we're talking about eating, which is also very common among the season, and so I don't know if anyone on here suffers from or experiences seasonal affective disorder, but getting in front of that too, because oftentimes when the seasons change, the light, it becomes darker earlier. It's darker when we first wake up, and so how do I prepare myself for that instead of giving into that? And so, Christina, what you said is, can you touch on what can cause us to detach from being overwhelmed? So I hope I'm getting your question right. So what I'm seeing you right is when we're overwhelmed, our body becomes overstimulated. And so with our brain's only purpose is to keep us alive, is to keep us in survival mode. And so when we're overwhelmed, we're literally having an influx or a surge of adrenaline, cortisol, all of these different emotions or all these different psychosomatic symptoms or physiological symptoms that increase our heart rate, that make it difficult for us to eat. So either people are overeating or undereating. And so part of the brain's response to that is, you know what, this is too much. And so I call it that hyperarousal, right? So I'm in a rage, I'm in a panic. The best thing for me to do is just to shut down. And so when I feel overwhelmed, in response to my body being overwhelmed physically and emotionally, I am going to shut down. That's a very, very common response. And our bodies do this to try to give ourselves a break so that we can rest, so that we can recuperate, so that we can be rejuvenating. And so that's a very, very normal response. And so with that, one of the things that we want to do is not allow ourselves to get our needs met only when my body has learned to shut down. And so and Sharice, I'll get to your point, your comment. And so when we do that, one of the things that we want to do one of the things that we've done is that we have created a tolerance. And so I want to talk about this from a trauma-informed care perspective because I am trauma. So one of the things that happens is that we have created our own trauma tolerance to our situation. So if I have trained my body to keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going, if I've trained myself to do that, what I have also trained myself to do is ignore all these symptoms, all these cues, all these little outbursts, all these moments or all these nights where I haven't had good rest, where I haven't had good sleep, where I've been mean to people that I love, where I've been mean to myself, where I've been beating myself up for thoughts or feelings. If I've trained myself to live that type of lifestyle, what is going to be, or I don't want to say harder, but what is going to take a conscious effort is me unlearning that, is me relearning or allowing myself to learn to give into my body's cues and signals for self-care earlier in that process. And so that is why, and just to come full circle, that is why I always say can I do something the moment that I wake up, right? Can I do something from the moment that I wake up? What is the easiest thing for me to do the moment that I wake up? The first thing is, can I give myself an opportunity to wake up peacefully, right? So many of us, our morning routine looks like we're running for a flight that is leaving in 5 minutes, right? We wake up at the very last moment possible. I snooze about 10 times before I actually get out of bed. So I'm breaking and interrupting my sleep. I get up late. I'm not eating breakfast. All right, I'm getting people out the house if I'm a parent. I'm rushing and fussing and, doing whatever I need to do to get people out the house. So I'm literally entering my car at a state of hyper awareness that is up here, right? I'm entering my car anxious and upset. So can I allow myself to create a morning routine that allows me to arise slowly, that allows me to arise peacefully, that allows me to look outside my window, that allows me to do a gratitude journal, or that allows me to do an intentions journal. I intend to feel this way, or allows me to acknowledge where I am. Today, I woke up feeling such and such. This is what I'm going to put in place to that. When I feel this way, I'm going to put on this song, right? What is the easiest song for me to listen to? Who is the easiest person that I want to make sure that I connect with? And so when we do that, we're setting ourselves up to have a more proactive stance. So Sharice, I want to go back to your comments. So I am not an expert in EMDR, so I will just speak on this just very, very briefly. But EMDR is used to treat symptoms related to trauma. And it talks about rapid eye movement. And the premise, if I'm correct, and hopefully I'm correct, if not, definitely look it up yourselves and research it. But the premise is that as I'm able to distract, so you're literally sometimes you're doing like this to a person, and you're having their eyes kind of follow you back and forth and share some of the reasons why they're feeling depressed or anxious. And the thought is that as I'm sharing it, but my mind is somewhere else, it takes away some of that anxiety and some of that physiological response to that event. And so, Dee, going back to your question, do I think that this relates to trauma? My stance around trauma is that my personal belief, and my training in working with survivors of trauma was that people, all of us, have the potential to be survivors of something that we would consider to be traumatic, right? So meaning that everybody has experienced and survived something, at least one event in their life that they would consider to be traumatic. Now, when it gets to adverse childhood experiences or adverse traumas, then you have a rating scale where you can have 4 or more, and that leads to different adult outcomes. So I really wouldn't be able to answer that question. What I'm saying is that we have all learned in our upbringing. We've all learned based on society, based on roles, based on what's culturally acceptable, ways that we operate, right? So what has been my narrative around emotions? What has been my narrative around self-care? What has been my narrative around behavior, right? When I get upset, this is what I do. So when we talk, Yetta, you said, when I'm anxious, my attitude goes left. Has that been reinforced, right? A lot of us walk around knowing people, well, she just has an attitude, or she's going through something, or she's doing something. And we just say that, and that's where the story ends versus, she's going through something and yet she's doing something, about it, or, and yet she's doing this, or, and yet she's reaching out for help. How have we been taught to normalize feelings of anxiety, anger, depression, trauma? And I think that really is the question versus, is this directly related to trauma? Because a lot of times, even with trauma can be normalized in our society, so it becomes the norm. So I expect it, and that makes it harder for people to break away from. So when we talk about, and Shamia, when we say, can I create a morning routine that allows me to wake up slowly or acknowledge where I am? Yes, we can. Starting with that, Christine, I want to go to your comment really quickly. I wish women's support groups existed for trauma survivors. There is a wonderful one that if you are a mental health clinician, I encourage you to get trained on. It is called Seeking Safety. And if someone could write that in the comments, Seeking Safety is a wonderful evidence-based trauma group for women survivors of either PTSD or addiction or both. And it has wonderful grounding exercises, mindfulness exercises, and ways to walk through your recovery process. So that is a wonderful tool. And I pull from that often when working with survivors of trauma and helping them understand what they're going through. And so when we talk about this, just moving forward, so we've talked about, can I create a different narrative? Can I create a different routine? One of the things that is so important in this process is the incorporation of compassion. Thanks, Chandra. So one of the things, again, when we talk about creating routines and compassion is, as I'm going through this process and as these feelings come up, how am I acknowledging or how am I honoring myself in being where I am? So thinking about some of the comments that I've already seen. Thank you, everyone who wrote down seeking safety. Thinking about some of the comments that I've already seen around, I get angry or I get anxious. When I feel that way, instead of, again, emotions lead to thoughts, lead to behaviors. Instead of allowing it to get to that behavioral part, when I get to the thought, can I work to catch that thought a little bit sooner? So I'm going to give us two techniques. And depending on where you are with the thought, you decide for yourself which one will work best for you. So one thought is, I don't have to think this, right? Giving ourselves permission to think something else. So that usually works well when I'm at work. I need to do something else, right? And this thought just comes, I don't have to think this right now. And that's a part of what we call containment. So I'm acknowledging that it's here and I'm going to put it to the side until I'm able to go pick it back up, right? So I'm going to talk about this later. I'm going to talk about this with my safe person. I'm going to talk about this with my therapist. I'm going to journal about this later, but I'm acknowledging it. And again, the whole point of mindfulness, again, is just to acknowledge where we are. So that's one option. The second option is, this is where I am, and I'm going to allow myself to be here, understanding that this thought can pass, that I am not this thought, right? So there's a saying, don't believe everything that you think. Don't believe you are what you think, especially when it goes left, especially when it works to tell us a false narrative about ourselves. And so when I get there, I'm allowing myself to acknowledge that this is where I am. And then the second part is, how do I begin? And this is where that compassion piece comes in. How do I then begin to allow myself to tell a different story? Can I allow myself to tell a different story around whatever has happened? So, and yet I just want to use your example because you brought up the chronic pain. So how do I allow myself to think of this in a different way? So even if the pain stays, right? The goal is not to, the pain is going to go away. That's the story I'm going to tell. The story may be the pain is still here. And again, there we go, that and yet I'm pushing through, and yet there are moments when it's less than others, right? There are moments where, even though it's usually at a 10, there are moments when I feel that it's at an 8. And so how do I allow myself to create a new narrative around whatever it is that I'm experiencing so that I don't become kind of lost and engulfed in those thoughts? And like you said, reading and reciting positive affirmations, they help, right? Because it feeds my brain and my body's going to have a response to that as well. And so when we talk about this again, so what can I do in the morning when I get up? And once I get that morning part up, what can I start to put in throughout the day? And so I'm a big advocate of identifying triggers. So we all have, so our triggers are our nouns, right? So our people, places, and things. People, places, and things are either going to trigger happiness or they're going to trigger anger, anxiety, sadness, whatever. And so when we experience a trigger, it is important for us, and this goes back to Christina, one of the points that you made earlier. When I experience a trigger, what are things that I can put in place? And so the interesting thing about triggers is that a lot of times we have a reaction to them when in actuality, they're not really surprising, right? So I want us to think about, not too hard, but a person, a place, or thing that can be a trigger to us. So, maybe for me, a trigger for me is money. When I have money, my healthy eating habits go out the window because I like to eat all the good things, right? And so I'm saying this jokingly, but just to give that as a lighthearted example. And so, yet when I have money and I eat out or I eat bad, then I beat myself up. But the reality of it is that my trigger is something that I am aware of, right? It's not a surprise to me that every time I get an extra $20, I'm ordering desserts and appetizers. And so when we can get ahead of our triggers, right? When I can be proactive around what my triggers are, then I am incorporating that compassion to myself because I can prepare for them. So if I know that this person triggers this and this and this in me, what do I do before the conversation? How do I create a check-in point with myself during the conversation? And how do I prepare and create space for myself after the conversation? right? If I know that this place or this time of year, especially for people who are experiencing seasonal affective disorder or depression, or this brings back a bad memory for me, if I know that, a lot of times we get engulfed and we become anxious about it because I'm waiting for it to come. I'm waiting for it to happen. But I want us to allow ourselves to be proactive in it. So if I know that this is coming, what are the safest places? Again, what are my safest joy triggers, right? What are the safest people, places, and things that can help me to prepare for this, that can help me while I'm going through it, and that can help me once I've come out of it? And then how do I begin to walk us through this? And how do I begin to tell a different narrative? So maybe for me, October is a difficult month, right? And anxiety would have me believe, oh my God, I hate October. October is so hard. I can't do October. My new narrative would be October is hard, right? I want to acknowledge that. I'm not rejecting that. I'm going to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that. And yet I've made it through Octobers before, right? I've done Octobers before. I've done 30 something Octobers before. What has helped me get through them? How do I pull on those things, right? That speaks to our survival. What things have helped me through this before? How do I pull on those things and use them for right now, right? That's how I become proactive. And if it's an event that I'm experiencing for the first time, right? If it's an event that I'm experiencing, I want to honor that. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. However, I do know what makes me feel safe, right? I do know who makes me feel safe. I do know what things I enjoy. How do I start to fill my day with those things as I'm experiencing this? The interesting thing about anxiety and depression as it relates to our thoughts is that those feelings will kind of convince us that they're the only thing that we can feel, right? So when I am in the throes of depression, or when I'm in the throes of anxiety, it's like, nope, it's just me and anxiety. We one-on-one today, right? We're having an individual session. When in reality, I can experience a multitude of other emotions while I'm experiencing this that may actually help to lessen my anxiety. I can give that to myself. That's that compassionate piece. I can give that to myself. And so when we feel that way, and it makes me think of a saying, people always say, I was having a good day until this happened. And so we'll allow things to come. We will allow things to come in our lives and kind of knock us off of our high-flying disc or our high-flying horse. But when when we are in our spaces of, depression, anxiety, or in a way or in a mood, it's like, nope, I'm having a bad day and I'm having a bad day for the rest of the day. Well, it was only the first 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes are going to determine the next 23 hours. And so allowing ourselves the opportunity to experience more than one emotion as we are going through it. And then part of it too with compassion is understanding and acknowledging when I need help. So one of the things, I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is permission to seek help. And that's why I had, the hashtag, you can have Jesus and a therapist too. Now, I just want to go spiritual real quick. A lot of times there's a stigma in that if I seek help, that's an insult or a jab at my faith. But if you are a believer in Christ or whatever your belief is, all religions talk about guarding your mind, right? Guarding your heart and guarding your mind and thinking of those things which are pure, which are true. And so how do I incorporate that in a part or as a part of my process? And so when we talk about this, or when we talk about our process, and like you said, Christina, too, no, I won't let you take me there again. Allowing that, right? Allowing that I have the power to either go there or I have the power to stay here. And also giving ourselves compassion when we go there, right? Because sometimes, some days, great, I can say that and I'm on to something else. Some days it's like, nope, I'm going there. And with that, I just like to think of, hey, can you take a nap? Can you go to sleep? Can you distract yourself? What can you do in the moment? Again, when we talk about understanding the process, what can you do in that moment that will bring you a little bit of relief? The goal is when I have gone fully there, the goal isn't to get to a zero. The goal is If I'm at a 10, how do I get back down to a 9? And so D, just to answer your question, you'll be our last question before we wrap up. To me, compassion is essential in healing. And I always say, so healing without compassion leads to judgment. And so you become very critical of where you are or where you perceive yourself to be. And it allows a lot of shoulds. And so shoulds will keep you guilty, right? I should be further along. I should be over this right now. I should be this. I shouldn't have done this. I should have said this. And when I should myself, I'm taking myself out of the present moment, and I'm putting myself either in an anxious state of thinking or a depressive state of thinking. Compassion allows us to see ourselves as human. And so when I'm able to see myself as a human being experiencing a multitude of emotions, I am able to meet myself where I am and give myself what I need. And I just want to echo, Daniela, your statement about, yes, it's okay to ask for help. You know, our mind is our greatest organ, our strongest organ. And so with that, you know, we are all, none of us are immune to life's happenings. None of us. There's no profession, there's no income bracket, there's no family structure that is immune to that. And the more we are able to acknowledge and give myself the space to say, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, the more I am able to empower myself to seek help and seek permission to feel something differently, right? To feel something differently. And that is what we deserve. And so there, yes, it can be scary, it can be embarrassed. And my response to that would be, do it scared, do it embarrassed, right? Seek help embarrassed, you know, seek help scared. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. When we talk about being brave, bravery is not, I don't feel this. Bravery is pushing, or not put, because pushing through kind of has a stigma, but allowing ourselves to continue although we feel a different way. And so the bravery that comes with allowing myself the permission to acknowledge that I want to feel differently is the first step in any of our healing. And so I want to end with this. So yes, Dee, this is every Tuesday. And so again, so wrapping up, our 3 takeaway points is 1, how do I maximize the things that bring me joy? So again, that goes with our morning routine. If morning is not the easiest place for time for you, if morning is hectic and I can't start in the morning, what is the easiest time of day for me to maximize the things that bring me joy, right? So I don't want to give you morning if you're not a morning. If you're a night person, when everybody goes to sleep, do it at night. And that sets me up to have a better night's sleep. So whatever works for you, I want to encourage you to do it. What are the things that I can maximize that bring me joy? When can I do them? The second is, how do I incorporate compassion when I feel something, right? How do I say to myself, this is hard and I may not be where I want to be? No shoulds, no shoulds. I may not be where I want to be. That can be my truth. And yet, right? Those 2 words, and yet I'm still showing up. And yet I am still asking for help. And yet I'm still seeking out resources. And then 3, how do we create a new narrative? How else can I see myself, and how else can I retell the story that is empowering to me when we talk about mental health? You know, I've been feeling this way, and I decided that this was enough, right? Instead of, oh my gosh, I've been feeling this way for the past 5 years, I'm always going to feel this way. No, I'm going to acknowledge it. I have been feeling this way. And today I decided that this is enough. And today I'm going to reach out to someone. You know, who are my safe nouns? Who are my safe people? Who are my safe places? Who are my safe things? So that is our conversation today, Daniela. I will not forget about you. I'll put it right in the comments as soon as we leave. So yes, we meet every Tuesday for Dr. Tar Tuesdays. As always, let's heal together. We are doing a surviving series for the month of October. So I'm hoping to bring some wonderful guests on here with me next Tuesday. But I look forward to seeing you all here. And as always, let's heal together. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you. Peace.